So, what is the solution to poverty? Do individuals fall into poverty simply because they're lazy and refuse to work hard? Can the American dream apply to people with low socioeconomic status so long as they sacrifice and work hard? Much data shows that the American dream does not really help the poor. The American dream can be described as a neoliberalist discourse that individualizes poverty and inequality, and therefore masks the structural inequality rooted in the capitalist economic system, as well as structural challenges in our society that make it hard for individuals to get out of poverty once they fall into it, or if they are born into it. In fact, some people living in poverty are working full-time the full year. In Canada, 1 in every 6 people living in poverty works full-time year-round. This is where social structures can be seen to influence individuals. 7.6% of Canadians between 18 and 64 years old constitute the working poor. According to Statistics Canada, the working poor is defined as individuals between 18 and 64 who live independently, are not students, and earn at least $3,000 a year with an after-tax family income below the low-income threshold. Statistics Canada reports that Canadians who are working poor are more likely to have jobs that are less stable, work hours that are unpredictable, fewer benefits associated with their job, including plans for drugs and dental, disability insurance. These are the same Canadians who are more likely to see their hours and wages reduced under COVID. I'm now going to quote directly from this 2019 Statistics Canada article, which I have included the link to here. Quote, "The proportion of working poor is 2 times higher among those who are recent immigrants than those who are non-immigrants. The working poor proportion as compared to white Canadians is 2.2 times higher among Black Canadians, 1.5 times higher among East Asian slash Southeast Asian Canadians, 1.5 times higher among Arab, South Asian, and West Asian Canadians. First Nations people, both on reserve and off reserve, have 2.1 times higher proportion of working poor than non-Indigenous people." It is recommended in this article that reducing inequalities among the working poor requires providing access to education, safer working conditions, job security, a social safety net, including pensions and benefits, and addressing discrimination. Did you know that Canada has a higher rate of the working poor than many other developed countries, such as Belgium, France, and the United Kingdom? Because of the high living standard, despite working full-time, there are still many people living under relative poverty in Canada. So how is this possible? This is because minimum wage is close to the poverty line. Let's do some basic calculations. In Vancouver, the minimum wage updated June 1st, 2020 is $14.60 an hour. So if you were to work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, your before tax income would be $30,368. This is a few $1,000s above the poverty line. It's enough for one person in a large city like Vancouver, but not enough for them to support a child, a spouse, or a parent. That would push them below the poverty line. So let's return to this idea of the poverty trap. The poverty trap is the structured challenges individuals face when trying to escape poverty. A poverty trap is created when an economic system requires a significant amount of various forms of capital in order to earn enough to escape poverty. So we can see how Ehrenreich's book, Nickel and Dimed, really illustrates this poverty trap through the examples she experienced when she herself tried to maintain several low-wage jobs and support herself. She had just enough to barely get by, was not able to save any extra money to change her conditions, and was ultimately trapped in her situation, albeit temporarily in her researcher status. In many cases, people living under poverty face numerous and compounding systemic barriers and are not able to access enough economic, social, and cultural capital to change their situation and escape poverty permanently. And thus poverty becomes a cycle. It's hard to get an apartment if you don't have a job, and it's hard to get a job if you don't have an apartment. Social capital, who you know, in addition to economic capital, also tends to help people get a foot in the door in an industry they're trying to break into or a job that they're interested in. Probably you yourself or someone you know has used social capital, at least to get an interview, if not to get a job. People living in poverty may not have these same social networks and strategically placed social contacts. And it can be hard to pursue higher education to better your situation when working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. Education is expensive and time-consuming. Here we see 2 diagrams. Although the picture on the right side is talking specifically about the poverty cycle in relation to disability, I think it nicely points out that the poverty trap or poverty cycle is not solely about economic disparity, but it's a cycle that reinforces the unequal and unequitable distribution of social, cultural, human, and economic capital between lower socioeconomic status and higher socioeconomic status groups, thus resulting in different life chances for members of these different groups. So what are life chances? This concept was introduced by German sociologist Max Weber, a philosopher, jurist, and political economist. Life chances are the probability of chances that individuals can access, quote, important societal resources such as food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare. For Weber, people who belong to the same class have a shared probability of having the same life chances. And here we're talking about general social trends. Weber's concept of life chances helps us to see the poverty cycle as a cycle of reduced life chances and low social mobility, thus resulting in tightened stratification between different classes. Here we see COVID-19 news coverage titled, "Enduring COVID-19 with a Low Income, BC's Hardworking Heroes, Children Left Behind, and Food Bank Boom Times." Opinion, working poor among the hardest hit during COVID-19 pandemic. So we see here the intersection of the poverty trap, reduced life chances, and COVID-19 conditions, particularly for precarious laborers.
Let's hear Hesed Torres' story, published in the Vancouver Sun in May 2020. Quote, Hesed Torres works 2 full-time jobs, one from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. and the other from 4 p.m. to midnight, as a support worker in 2 downtown Eastside social housing buildings for women and children. Living with 1 paycheck? Maybe if I was single, says Hesed. Maybe if I was young that would work, but I have too many responsibilities, so it just doesn't work with 1 paycheck. I'm always short, said Torres, who was profiled in the Vancouver Sun Working Poor series in 2017. According to Statistics Canada, BC's average hourly wage in 2019 for full-time work was $29.34, and Hesed makes below that at both her jobs. She spends $900 on rent for her basement apartment and sends about $700 to the Philippines each month, where her mother is raising her 9-year-old daughter, whom she has applied to bring to Canada. She does not qualify for any government aid programs. After 5 hours sleep each night, she struggles to get out of bed in the morning when her alarm sounds. I just push myself to do it. I don't want my pay to get cut for missing a day or 2, so I power through. This was a grind before COVID-19, but has been financially and psychologically more tasking since. Torres, 34, can't get sick because she can't afford to lose any pay, so she's been avoiding public spaces like city buses and food stores. Instead, she's spent extra money on taxis and Ubers and has been ordering fast food. I don't think I should really be going to the grocery store because it is where everyone goes these days, so I end up eating really bad food, Torres says. She works with women and children who live together in supported housing, where best efforts are made to maintain social distancing, although this is not always possible. Quote, it definitely makes me feel nervous in that I have to go outside and still face people, although we do have protocols in place. Still, sometimes you can't really avoid closing that distance, Torres said. Quote, when a woman falls out of her bed, you just can't not respond to that. You have to go to her unit and help her, or an overdose. It's hard, unquote. Torres likes the work and is grateful to still be collecting 2 paychecks when so many people have none. She hopes, though, to raise awareness about some of the other hardworking people on the front lines of this pandemic. Quote, I don't think people are really understanding how many of us are still working. And it's not just the health workers that are going to work, but it's other essential services like us, unquote. In this real story, using what we've learned this class, including concepts like the poverty trap and life chances, what is the impact of COVID-19 for people like Torres?